Major John Spencer, thank you so much for joining us, for helping us out with the space and everything. Your experience and knowledge has been incredibly helpful to all of us. Uh, are you tired of all the work questions or you good?
No, not at all. I think it's my small part to this overall struggle that Walter, you, and the whole crew do what we can. So, the hundreds of interviews I've done, I think it's just my small part in the helping in the cause.
Well, it sure is helpful. You are very knowledgeable when it comes to urban warfare. That is your, can we say it's your specialty?
Absolutely, it's what and not to just bolster my own self. There's actually few people in the world who have been allowed or have chosen to only focus on that aspect of warfare. I mean, as you know, there's plenty of analysts out there, lots of smarter people than me, but there's few that have been allowed to only focus on urban operations. So I call myself an urban warfare student because I'm learning every day. But it is my focus, my specialty, my passion.
Let's start with the question I'm sure you've gotten every day almost since this whole thing started. When you see the Ukrainian troops and how they're doing when it comes to defense, what is your biggest thing that you're mostly impressed about, and what are they doing that is so right? Because many people are really like almost in shock over how well they've been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge question to ask, actually. All wars include both offense and defense. And so that's why it's hard to say, like, hey, they've done really good at defending. But in the Ukrainian, in the illegal invasion of Russia into Ukraine, a lot of the, I try not to quote all these famous people all the time, but there are military theories that have been around for centuries, and some of them hold true to today. Like Sun Tzu saying the worst strategy any military could take is attack a besieged city. Or, there's a famous German that talks about all wars, politics by other means. War is like a wrestling match. You're struggling against another opponent, trying to impose your will on them. So with the Ukrainians military, with support, you and I both know, with so much amazing support from the territorial defense, civilian volunteers, it's prevented the enemy, the illegal invasion of Russia, from doing what it wants to do. So that's number one. Now there's all kinds of interesting things in Ukraine that make Russia's job a lot harder to do. One is a motivated Ukrainian military person with training and weapons and everything. But there's, again, you have to look at it through the lens of what the goal is of Russia, right? From day one, the goal was to get into Ukraine, get to the urban areas, take them away from Ukrainian people, and impose, there's long-term conversations of putting in their own government, the false narrative, liberating people. But there was a goal. So it doesn't matter like how much war study I've done. It really comes down to, you want to stop the other guy from doing what he wants to do, which is get into your urban areas. In Ukraine, that's really hard to do because it's really muddy. The roads, which
Especially
Ukraine has been improving. Yeah, especially now, which forces the military to use roads, which we don't like to do. So the Ukrainians from day one have done a great job in protecting what's vital, the urban spaces, and immediately going into the defensive principles, blocking roads, but also attacking at any chance they can along the roads, in ambushes and things like that. So it is actually pretty simple. That sometimes we want to make warfare very complex, and a lot of the, from I'm just an old soldier who's like, some of this stuff is really simple. And the number one thing is the passion, the will, the fighting for a cause that the Ukrainians have that the Russians don't. So from day one, they went in really at the advantage. And that's a long answer, but there's so much I'm impressed with. There's military tactics I'm impressed with. the use of the weapons they've been given. I mean, they had their own, Ukraine produces their own things. They have a very large military industrial complex that produced their own. So it wasn't just like, oh, they used these weapons that people gave them. They've been preparing, but I mean, to be honest, if you frame that question differently, I'm most impressed with the Ukrainian people. What the Ukrainian people did after day one is not normal. I can tell you as a urban warfare, just a war. I used to teach strategy at West Point. A lot of people say I'll fight for my country, but in war that usually doesn't happen, and rightfully so. War is scary. Fighting is scary. Civilians usually run, in the military, and that's I think why people discounted the Ukrainian military, because of just looking at numbers. Right? The Russians are so powerful, so big. Yeah, but they, with the territorial defense and all that, and the will to fight of this, of course, it would be a nightmare for the Russian military. And there are things that the Russian military totally surprised the world on what they couldn't do. But the overall theme of this war will be what the Ukrainian people did.
Right. It's the spirit within them, kind of, that like they really have something they're fighting for. I wanted to ask you about that too. I know I asked you during one of our spaces, but since that's live, people miss it. And I think your answer was incredible. And I think it's important. We are now when we are recording this, we have passed 6 weeks of the invasion. The adrenaline is sinking a little bit. How can they keep the motivation up? Because I can't imagine how it is going for this long and not knowing when this will end. And you don't get the same rewards anymore of like attacking. So yeah, how do the soldiers and the civilians in there too keep the morale up?
Yeah, that's a really amazing question that is insanely complex. And you've heard me talk about I can talk weapons, I can talk military stuff, but my passion is actually talking the mental aspects of the soldier and the civilian. You have Nobody can discount the leadership of the Ukrainian people. President Zelensky's the power of messages like his. So, and the stories of the stories of heroes, those have more power than any bullet or any weapon on the battlefield. That is what keeps people fighting. Zelensky's speeches and some of his quotable moments will go down in history, like Winston Churchill, George Washington, General Eisenhower. People discount the power of those messages to keep people fighting. It's what is it is. It is, I say the morale and the cohesion of the fighter is the glue that makes it all work. And you can't, and leadership is such a big part of that. Leadership at all levels. So I was just reading how the Russian military hasn't had a general in charge of their campaign, their illegal invasion from day one. And that you can't understand. I understand, as I felt goosebumps when President Zelensky talked to the U.S. Congress, and his video is the power. It's informational power. There's actually four sources of national power. One is military, that everybody kind of focuses on. They understand it. One is economic. One is diplomatic, and one is informational power. That has the ability to keep people fighting for well past even human capabilities. What we think humans can endure with in suffering, it is the power of ideals and power of informational power that from the worst conditions imaginable, in concentration camps and everything, it's been proven that it's having a cause, having something you believe in. The way you keep this going and keep it, the Ukrainian people and the military's morale is one aspect of motivation, but keep keep them strong is through continued messages from leaders, continued stories like Snake Island, and so many examples. And that really that what, what Walter Space does is help, when you bring somebody in who is in there in the worst imaginable situation and said, no, I'm here, I'm strong. That will spread like wildfire to keep people fighting, to be honest, from the soldier to from the person that is suffering.
Yeah. You also told a story, I think, when you were a soldier yourself, uh, when you see your fellow soldiers starting to become unmotivated, how do you guys boost each other up when you don't have the um, connection to the president's speeches and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I don't want to plug my book, but I wrote a book about my own experiences and the severe challenges that even we were facing, and we're the best military in the world at in dark moments, when even when you suffer losses, it's really challenging. But there are things that have been done in across time that we know help um, endure extreme stresses, endure setbacks, and all that. There is cohesion is the lifeblood of a fighter. Across time, across armies, across wars, there's been one answer to why are you fighting. Uh, there are many reasons on why soldiers fight. The overwhelming answer is because of the person to the left and right. And it's because they've formed a bond, which is actually not as simple as people think it is. That, yeah, I form a little group, I fight together, we form a bond. It's actually things that are formed over mindless hours of just being together, talking about their lives together. It is also about enduring suffering together. It's called hardships. So, militaries do that by like doing exercise together and hard training and things like that. In combat, those moments will happen, but actually, even in high intensity combat like this, as you know, this is endured for weeks. You have soldiers that you make sure they're spending time together. So in the off hours, they're eating together, they're sleeping together, they're talking to each other. If they experience something really bad, uh, they get in a little group and they talk about it. And there's vulnerability in that. There's power in that. Those messages that come out, those messages get spread and then they get talked about. So you can see that it's a way to build a small group that is very strong. But it also hurts when the stronger you make the group, it hurts so bad when one of them is killed or one of them suffers, or one is a casualty that might not have been killed. But it is the lifeblood of a fighting formation. So in my book, I talk about a system, and everything from from the leaders, the role, to the keeping the equipment good. It all matters. It actually all does. I mean, and that's why it's hard to talk about it. But at the very basis of it is, we say that you want people to be friends with each other. And I've seen where, no, that guy's a butthead. No, I don't like that person. But that's different than forming a what we call a brotherhood or a sisterhood. And that is powerful. And that's how you keep morale whole. You're doing things as a group, as together, whether that's sharing your food together, if you have a little bit, or just touching somebody. Actually, if you put your hand on another person's shoulder and say, hey, are you okay? That is powerful. And I think in our virtual world, although this is very powerful, what our space does, physical connection, we are social beings to our core, and it means a lot. So there's some things that just can't be virtual. So if you're fighting on the front like this, a hug. Look, I'm a some people might think I'm a tough guy. There is science that a hug releases chemicals in your body that help individuals that are suffering. Physical contact actually matters. So I'm not, I don't say go out and just start hugging everybody, but if when another soldier looks another soldier in the eye and says, Ash, are you okay? That is powerful.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people have been so touched when they see Ukraine. Like, I mean, there's so many devastating videos, but the unity of the Ukrainian people and their troops, like you say, the brotherhood and sisterhood, it is really inspiring to see. And like you say, tough guys need hugs too. So it's good to see that they stick together like that.
Yeah,
Uh,
maybe it's just a hand on the shoulder,
yeah,
but
maybe not
you
hugs yet.
know, yeah, it is. I mean, it is. War is still human. I mean, that is. We have these things in military world. There's one called the nature of war, and there's one called the character of war. The nature of war will not change no matter what happens in the world, and one of those is that it's just human endeavor.
I was actually wondering too, when it comes to uh, the aftermath of this, which we don't know when it's going to be, but how do you deal with all the things that you've seen, especially when we see so many casualties in the civilians and stuff like that? How do you deal with that, and how can we help with that? Because to me, that feels like that's where I'm gonna really struggle to be able to, because we see it, but we are not there. How do you process that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and there's a lot of people that are experts in this. It's the names of it have changed across time. I addressed it in the book because I think, again, the I talk about soldiers, but then I talk about families because I became a family member as my wife went off to war. Basically, humans band together into communities for a reason, and that's why cities develop. And cities aren't the physical space, so we'll have to rebuild Ukraine. But Ukraine is not the buildings; it's the people. And I've done a lot of research on, can you destroy a city or village or town, you name it, and it's really hard to, because it's the people. So when this is over, when we and the Ukrainian people return, um, it'll grow, it'll come back. But you're right. How do you deal with the trauma from what is war? There's no simple solution to that, actually. One of the things that we know helps, you can call it a tribe, you can call it a community, you can call it just a group of friends. Um, the thing is that no matter what has been seen, that person needs a tribe. They need community. They need to talk about it. Now, there's different variations of, even I have my own baggage from what I saw in war, and sometimes I don't want to talk to anybody that I don't think can relate. But talking about my experiences is therapeutic. So us, and to be honest, even you who watch this every day, it's impacting us, even though we're not the ones, directly suffering. And I saw what your talk with Water, and it was touching. It's clearly impacting him.
Yeah.
But this, you can't do it alone. So when bad things start to happen to people, and I talk about this a little bit in my book, it's usually because they feel like they've basically seen so much, done so much, whatever, that they internalize it, and then becomes they're alone. But so we're more connected in the world ever in history, but we're actually also more alone, because we revert into this virtual environment. Um, the things that help with that is the fact that you're not alone, right? So the space is so huge because it allows so many walks of life to come in and ask questions that you and I know. Some of the questions are really, they're hard to comprehend because people struggle understanding what they're seeing, and wanting answers to why and all that. So the biggest solution to this is to stay connected to what's important, not to pun that. But friends, family, talking is, much of this is unique to the individual, right? So even the people that we're bringing on, onto the space that are in Ukraine and in all the different cities, the fact that they're connecting is helpful to them. that we listen to them.
Yeah.
You know this. I'm almost preaching to the choir, but even as an organizer of this, is that we all have to have somebody that we can talk to, and never revert into, and this can go down into like depression and even worse, because people feel like they're alone.
Right.
Uh,
I think it's interesting too, because now that you talk about it, I haven't even uh, thought about it before, but I think one of the best things about our space is that we actually have the people that are in Ukraine still that comes in and talk to us when they have time. Uh, and I mean, that's probably one of the first times in history where people in war can so easily also connect to the rest of the world, because we actually do have all the platforms and stuff like that. So it's nice to know that that's also very useful the other way around, and not just something we appreciate, but that can also
yeah.
help them.
Yeah, actually, there's a lot of research too on what's called helplessness. So there's the aspect of being alone, but we've heard from so many people that are almost internalizing, and they're not even in the war. They're just watching, like you said.
Yeah.
We're at a moment where you can watch it so in the agony, and the, especially the children touch me so much. There's something called helplessness that actually causes people to spiral, as well as when they think they can't help.
Right.
And I know Walter usually starts off with ways people can help. Um, one is just to don't turn away. Well, you stay connected on what's going on, be a part of the conversation. But helplessness, when you think, whether you're in it or whether you're watching it, is huge into spiraling into bad things. So there's, even in my, my mini manual, one of the things that civilians can do to help themselves as well as help resist is to stay busy. Because when you allow soldiers or civilians or anybody to get a feeling of helplessness, it can be, I mean, just cause all things to end. But you should never stop. You got to stay busy. You got to keep doing that. There's things you can do, because helplessness is actually another disease almost.
Yeah. Um, if we go back to the actual work of defense, when we see how Russia has been playing these dirty games, like there's been the propaganda, and then we hear the targeting of civilians, um, ruining hospitals. How does that change the way Ukrainians have to defend themselves? Because it's almost like if you have all these rules and regulations in war, but they are not being followed by the intruder. Um, how does it change the defense tactics?
Yeah. So again, oh man, it's a big one. Number one is
Sorry.
you see in my book, any defender's number one priority has to be protection, not thinking about attacking.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if your defense is, to be honest, what somebody who is not able to attack does, because the defense is stronger, right? You let them attack you, they're already not winning. You have to think about that as well. Um, like being underground, choosing the buildings correctly, in the overall plan of the defense, because like I talk about the bombings and things like that, and they will continue to be used as we're speaking. So there's all kinds of things that the people you're trying to protect have to keep in their mind about, um, thinking about where they're going to go when the sirens go off, adhering to the curfew, which is actually a life-saving measure. Um, having really planning is what's so important in both just trying to survive, which is a huge aspect of this, and then also being able to resist. Most of my manual is just about surviving in the defense. Everything from drinking water to having a plan of where to go when the sirens go off, or where to be if you're going to be a part of the resistance. It's only more important, those aspects of that, especially when the enemy in Russia is using such vicious, illegal tactics. I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yeah, absolutely, it does. And I think, like you said, it's probably hard to answer it too, because mm, it's it's hard to plan what's going to happen next, right? So, like you say, just protection is probably more important than the attacks because of that too.
yep.
Um, what do you think we're going to see? I mean, this is i- difficult to answer too, but we talked yesterday when you were on about the ground is the frost is taking off, so we see like all the mud, and from what we've seen from the Russian troops, they haven't been doing so well. What do you think we're gonna see in the next coming month or so?
Ooh, month from now. I thought you were going to
Or
say tomorrow.
oh, do tomorrow first. That's fine.
Uh, no, no. So it's really hard. We have these funny colloquiums that all us military guys will say about the fog of war, which is both symbolic and actually real, right? Because weather can have a huge impact on fighting. I mean, a lot more than I think people still realize when they think about all the advanced technologies of drones and all this. No, actually, Mother Nature still can really impact fighting. Everything from, like you said, when the ground thaws and more mud and the land of Ukraine helps fight back, prevents Russians from moving around. So we're going to see in the next weeks and a lot more movement by Russia to kind of go to Plan D, which I agree. There's no reason to announce why they're doing it. So there's also a very, lots of caution in planning for what the Russians are going to do, because you never trust what a Russian is going to say. Trust what he does.
We learned
Uh,
that, yeah.
yeah, but you defense, offense, Russia's gotta is moving around, which makes them extremely vulnerable. It makes them vulnerable to attack, but it also makes them vulnerable to the weather, to the fact that the ground is softening up. So even things that we're driving over a week ago can't be driven over today. And that's helping us, right? So we're seeing vehicles get stuck in the mud. Now, hopefully they drove that into the mud on purpose, because they're looking for any way not to fight. And we're seeing a lot of that. But I mean, the fog of war can actually be fog. It can be rain. It can be that's coming, right? So it's going to start raining a lot more, and I think you're going to see a slowing down of soldiers do slow down when they get wet and cold. It's a fact. Uh, if they're really close to the fight, you can push through that, but it impacts. I mean, I think, a month from now. So a month from now is even more dangerous to me than a week from now, because in a month from now, you could pull Russian forces out of the north and the west back into Belarus or back into Russia and start refitting them, and then push a stronger force into areas that maybe you want to concentrate on, if that in fact is where they're what we think. And I agree with all the analysis that's open, that's likely the next phase of this operation. Like, Ukraine won in defeating Russia's first goal. Russia's not going to leave without continuing to attempt to goals, and goals do change in the war. That's actually pretty normal. And what we say, the enemy gets a vote. So for Russia, the enemy's got a vote, and they've had to, because they can't change their plans. But in a month from now is dangerous, to be honest, because then I think it would take weeks to pull. If they do, they might leave, which is bad on them, because the Ukrainians are getting stronger actually in moving out and hitting stationary or moving Russian targets. So you see a lot more Russian deaths, I think, in the next couple of weeks, which leads to the political outcome that we want. We want Ukraine goes to the political table, which is all wars about political negotiations, in a huge aspect of it in strength. And that's really frustrates Putin and Russia, when Ukraine can come at this with strength. But a month from now, you have the ability to and this is more than I do about the Russian conscript system. And we're hitting this critical phase where the current conscripts, not all, and not all Russians are conscripts, to be sure, that some of them are contracted, and some of them are professional soldiers that aren't. But there's this big turnover to conscripts, right? So he could stop loss the current ones, which causes a lot of problems from our own history. Which it means that their time is up, right? Their 2 years or whatever it is of forced service, or they volunteered into a conscript system, that time is up. In a month from now, we'll know what the Russians are doing with the current batch. So over 100,000 that would have normally been planned anyways to fill in the conscript system that is the backbone, a huge part of the Russian military. So a month from now, we'll all know whether the 100,000+ that are currently in service, that are demoralized, whatever, have been pulled back to rest, recuperate. And then these 100,000 other ones coming in, will they be sent into these formations? So it's really dangerous if we can't force Russia to leave, that in a month from now, you could have a whole new war. Less, I think, no less dangerous to the people fighting it, of course. But you could have like basically a whole new war in the eastern part of Ukraine. I think Kyiv, in my personal opinion, Kyiv is less in danger as more time moves forward, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that's a long answer, but in a month from now, we could actually see worse fighting.
Yeah. I'm gonna let you go soon. I just have one more question for you, because yesterday we saw some footage, and it's not been confirmed yet, but we've seen an attack in Russia now on the fuel storage there. We don't know yet if it is Ukraine. They have not confirmed it. We have also seen Russia sabotage for themselves and shoot down their own plane, so we don't know. But how does this change? Because that would be a whole new part of this war.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I mean, it's so hard, even with our access to information, to know what's disinformation. If this is about information warfare, the way you fight that is with facts.
Yeah.
So, and Ukraine is literally schooling Russia, who used to be the masters of information warfare. They're schooling them on so many levels, on fight disinformation with facts and video, which still there's deep fakes and there's all this aspect to it. Since Russia has been so freely bombing so many sites in Ukraine, and Ukraine is a sovereign nation, to me, that it isn't that far off of, yes, it's historic, and it's been a long time in history where somebody's attacked within Russian territory objectives. In this war, which is clearly a recognized armed conflict between two recognized nations, no matter what Russia says, is it abnormal, and the targets that have been selected really outside the chart of acceptable in war? No. Especially, I mean, fuel depot in near Lviv gets hit. Fuel depot in Russia gets hit. Is it huge and a boost of morale and should be celebrated and spread across Ukraine? Yes.
Okay. Good.
Now in that kind of, yeah, absolutely, right. Even as we get more and more evidence that that was legit and planned and purposeful, without escalating, allowing Russia to use it as an escalation on their end and a motivation on their end. But I think it's a great sign of, hey, this is a war. Well, military targets in Russia now, they're on the table.
And also probably not make it sound like this was Ukraine attacking Russia. It's still a part of their defense, isn't it? That even though it is on the Russian side, it's like you say, see it happen in Ukraine. Good thing that it's also the defense is working towards the other part of the border. So let's just follow that situation, because like I said, now we don't know much yet, but it's an interesting new aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. You can't, I think the targets, if selected by the Ukrainian military, are very safe and deliberate and messaged so that they can't be used as a rally call to, which is, we know from the protests and everything, there are people that are either completely against or on the fence what we call neutral. But I think any targets that are selected in the Russian Federation are carefully selected so that they're, as visibly and easily argued in fact, not going to push more people in the Russian to think that this illegal war is in any way justified.
Right. Thank you so, so much for joining me in this again, and come back to our space anytime. I know you jump on once in a while when you have time, and we
Yeah,
all appreciate it. So thank you so, so, so much, and
thank you.
we'll talk soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.